Uh, Cecil, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Eugene, how are you?
Thank you for joining us. I was just gonna send you a message. Okay. I think everyone has checked in now probably, and it's 6:02. We can kick off and the rest of the people can join us as we progress. So let me kick off and probably, can you hear me correctly?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for joining us for One Africa Network Leaders Forum. We'll be looking at boosting agility and resilience in crisis, especially in the context of COVID-19, today on Friday, 29th of May 2020. So today I'm your host. My name is Eugene Nizemana. For those who doesn't know me, I'm the co-founder and the CEO for SSG Consulting, and I'm also the chair for One Africa Network and the interim chair for African Business Chamber of Commerce based in Birmingham. Today I'm supported by my partner Dennis Aguma, who's a partner at the SSG and a co-chair at One Africa Network, and also a visiting lecturer at Birmingham City University. And also we are also joined by my colleague who's the head for business development, Ruth Adams, who's also be supporting us with the discussion and also looking at some of the questions that we've received to review later on. Before we start, I just want to give a bit brief about what One Africa Network is all. If you can see my screen, One Africa Network is a UK-based membership think tank social development organization launched in 2018 to specifically focus on issues affecting Black and African professionals, businesses, and entrepreneurs. Originally, we started based in the Midland, but with many opportunities presented, we've expanded across the UK, and also time to time also we're engaging members across Africa. So our main commitment is in advancing entrepreneurship, innovation, inclusive growth, sustainable and excellence within the economy. And we mainly do that through discussion panels like this one, where we invite experts to share their ideas, perspective, and thoughts on various topical issues that are inhibiting or affecting us, our members, to contribute or compete competitively within the economy. So mainly over the last, we engage our members in various initiatives ranging from discussion forums to social networking, business conferences, live discussion or webinar like this one. And also we do host a couple of business growth masterclass, and we plan to be hosting annual social celebrations such as One Africa Business Award, which we hope to host the first one in November this year. Hope that the situation will improve. So over the last 2 years, we've welcomed various speakers and experts from various walks of life and industry, ranging, as you can see, mainly from academia, from the business world. So we invite experts from diverse walks of life and industries to share their experience and expertise, and also their thoughts, and hopefully to inspire our members to transform and also become more competitive in the economy. These are some of the examples of the events we've been hosting, mainly face-to-face events, working collaboratively with Birmingham City University, West Midland Combined Authority, and other organizations within the Midland. And our hope is to expand, engage various organizations across the UK as the opportunities unfold. So for today's discussion, we are going to focus about boosting agility and the resilience, especially in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. And I'm sure a majority of you are aware where we just came from in the last 2-3 months. The context is, of course, is shifting every day, major disruption. First and foremost, COVID-19 has been a human tragedy affecting millions of people, and our thoughts to everyone who's been affected. And I hope everyone on this call is well and safe. And of course, it's a looming threat and taking us to uncharted territory in terms of business, economy, and people's livelihoods. And situation is rapidly evolving with major impact and implication on various angles. So we've seen quite a lot of changes, including lockdown and remote working taking center stage away from working in the office, restriction and travel movement. And we've seen quite a lot of market and supply chain disruption where quite a lot of travel has been restricted, and also movement of goods, cancellation of major events and the activities. Recession, of course, is guaranteed depending on who you speak to, and recovery not known, maybe this year, next year. So there's been quite a lot of implication in the last 2-3 months as a result of COVID-19, in addition to Brexit, which at the moment nobody is discussing about it. And of course, we've seen quite huge disruption within major corporate leadership level in terms of how to realign their operation strategy, organization, managing people, and all those. And some of the key things come up is, of course, unemployment, people losing their jobs, business transforming or realigning to the current or new norm, as you call it. And of course, finally, people well-being has also been affected, the major concern in terms of stress, mental health, and well-being as a result of the current crisis. So the agenda today is we have a few topics that we're going to discuss, and the aim is, and our hope is, hopefully our speaker will be able to provide useful and practical guidance and tips to our audience that they can take away today and adopt it to help them navigate the current situation, and hopefully come through the other end armed with better tools and more confident to compete in the new normal. So to help us go through some of the topics we have today, I'm delighted to welcome our speaker. From the right, we have Stephanie, who's the Deputy VP for the Law Society of England and Wales. And second, we have Jacqueline Onalo. She's a founder and the CEO for JOLT International. Third, we have Cecil Adjalo, who's the UK managing partner for Hiberus Tecnología and director for operation of Foundervine, which is a tech startup company. And we also have Lucy Findlay, who's the managing director for social enterprise market company, and Chikondi from Girls Education, UNICEF, and finally Chibwe, who's the partnership manager for DFID Comic Relief. Welcome. So I'll probably just kick off with Stephanie to introduce herself and also probably give a bit of brief about her background and how the situation has disrupted the business as usual, life as usual, and help us to probably answer the first question in terms of the context and some of the challenges that she's been seeing and how she's managed to manage the situation to overcome some of the challenges. Stefan, if you can hear me, welcome.
Thank you and good evening. Firstly, not since World War II has there been a crisis to cause such global disruption, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to shape the way we live and work, casting a shadow of uncertainty across society in every corner of the world. We have all been affected in a number of ways by the virus and the restrictions that have been implemented to keep us safe. Solicitors face some of the same challenges as everyone else, from how to keep themselves, their employees and their clients safe, to how to keep their businesses viable as work dries up, and to dealing with the physical and mental impact of the lockdown. We know, however, that many solicitors and firms, and in particular those smaller size firms, have specific needs and vulnerabilities that have been highlighted by the current crisis. The impact the partnership structure has had on their eligibility for financial support, the soaring cost of having to renew professional indemnity insurance, the continued burdens of regulatory compliance and more. Firms in sectors such as criminal legal aid work and high street conveyancing are also facing disproportionate impacts. In these uncertain times, the Law Society recognises the significant challenges facing so many of its members, and we are working hard to help them through this crisis. As soon as the lockdown was implemented, we moved quickly to establish a coronavirus task force to ensure that our members were adequately supported and to ensure that we are making the government aware of the needs of law firms. We set out 4 immediate priorities: looking after our members' safety, helping members keep their businesses going, helping members stay compliant, and protecting the rule of law. Since then, we have produced a wide range of tools and guidance, and we have engaged extensively with the government to ensure our members receive the support they need. We have daily calls with the Ministry of Justice, weekly calls with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and ongoing conversations with the Treasury, the Department of Health and Social Care, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, HMRC and others. We have also had regular contact with the Shadow Lord Chancellor and Shadow Attorney General, as well as the Chair of the Justice Committee in Parliament. We have been making the case tirelessly for more support for our members, and we will continue to do so. If I briefly address some of the headline concerns we're seeing across the world, challenges to the rule of law, human rights, and the spike in domestic abuse, before moving on to the issues the most pertinent to a return to work, workers' rights, immigration, and cross-border travel. We have unfortunately seen in some areas of the world the pandemic being used to erode vital human rights provisions, undermining the rule of law. The International Bar Association Human Rights Law Committee spoke on this recently, saying that some governments are leveraging the pandemic to repeal or amend human rights law, and that this disproportionately affects women and minorities. We have seen the arrest of 2 lawyers in Hong Kong more than 6 months after they are alleged to have committed crimes. In Hungary, the Orban administration has passed legislation allowing it to rule by decree without a time limit. In Poland, we've seen the government take the lessened likelihood of mass protests as an opportunity to reintroduce contentious legislation on abortion. And in Jordan and elsewhere, governments are resorting to emergency powers, prison threats, fines to silence those doubting official figures on the pandemic or critiquing the government. This is all sobering news, and we at the Law Society are very aware that those seeking to protect the rule of law in nations affected will need the support of the international legal community. It's been said that domestic violence has increased by over 49% since the lockdown was put in place. At the end of April, the United Nations Population Fund predicted at least 15 million more cases of domestic violence globally in 2020 as a result of pandemic restrictions. In the UK and elsewhere, this is exacerbated by lack of physical access to courts and by the inability of victims to get time away from their abusers. Another flashpoint area of law has been workers' rights. We've seen landmark rulings against Amazon in France off the back of union challenges to lack of hygiene in warehouses. The state of California has legislated for gig economy workers to be considered employees and therefore entitled to more support from their employer. Closer to home, the Independent Workers' Union is taking legal action against the Chancellor of the Exchequer, claiming that government support, income support for self-employed people discriminates against minority groups that make up a significant portion of the gig workforce. Another legal area of interest to many corporations and firms is international travel and immigration. Businesses want to employ international talent, and this often requires people to relocate. Meanwhile, normal business operation for many service providers requires cross-border travel. Throughout February and March, many countries closed their borders without warning, and as a result of the pandemic, in some cases leaving expatriates having lost their job and therefore their visa for the same reason stranded. Some countries have automatically extended temporary visas. New Zealand, Thailand, many EU members and Australia has changed student visas to allow international students to work in supermarkets. In the UK, temporary visa extension has not been automatic, but by request. One trend we have seen that is almost universal is legislators relaxing procurement laws, and this is to ensure that public buyers can purchase sufficient quantities of medical supplies to deal with the pandemic. However, this can increase corruption risk, such as price gouging. The non-governmental association Transparency International has warned that in some instances, governments have been forced to purchase masks at 25 times the original price. Needless to say, these are truly extraordinary times for everyone. We are all finding ourselves having to deal with difficult circumstances that none of us expected. But however long this situation continues, the Law Society will continue to provide the advice and direct support to members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for that brief introduction and overview in terms of some of the changes or shift or some of the dynamics that you've seen in the current situation as a result of COVID and the some. So hopefully we'll be able to deep dive into some of those things along the way, and probably we'll take some question in terms of to elaborate more in some of those things you mentioned. So if I go next to Jacqueline Onalo, also to introduce herself and also give a bit brief about her background and some of the transformation or disruption or changes that she's seen in the last 2-3 months as a result of COVID, and which has disrupted work as usual or business as usual. Jacqueline, welcome. We can't hear you. Hello? Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi there. Is that any better?
Yes, that's better.
Excellent. So I am Jacqueline Onalo, and I wear different hats. So my full-time job is that I'm a human rights lawyer. I am also a leadership development trainer. I'm a trustee at Comic Relief, and I work within diversity and inclusion, focusing on gender, race, and age. And so I will give my insights on the basis of those particular areas. We were asked to prepare a presentation, and I'm naming my presentation Nafasi. Nafasi is a Swahili word which means opportunity. And even in this crisis, there is an opportunity. I listened to a webinar a few days ago, and they used the Greek term kairos, and kairos means when is the opportune time. And I think in this crisis, there is no opportune time because we're shifting and changing so rapidly. And so you have to adapt, you've got to be agile as and when things happen. On Instagram, I think last week, I said that the challenges that we're facing are the exact opportunities for us in terms of dealing with this particular crisis. Now, a big thing about COVID is that COVID has either given us time or taken time away from us. And I begin by, first of all, just pausing for a moment to acknowledge those who literally run out of time, those who have died. Here in the UK, we are almost reaching 40,000. So they literally run out of time. The next category of people for whom time may seem endless and particularly difficult are for those who are bereaved, who are our colleagues and our friends, for whom we've not been able to comfort and reach out to in the traditional way, and may have or may not have been able to say goodbye. So for them, time could actually be torturous. For those who are unwell with either physical or mental illness, who are friends and colleagues, time for them could seem endless. And then we have a large number of our colleagues who I'm calling our MVPs, who are frankly doing something incredible. They're able to do so much more with less time. And so we have those who are working from home, and they're working from home full time. They're caring for young children, they're homeschooling, taking care of their homes, all of this within the same amount of time. And it is really something And that speaks of agility. So when I'm speaking about agility, it's not agility just of big organizations and governments, etc., but the common man and woman has been forced to be really agile. In terms of leaders across the sector, time has been of essence, the ability to adapt quickly. And I'd like to give an example at Comic Relief. So at Comic Relief, we have over 200 members of staff. We're very lucky, I'm spiritual. So just a week before lockdown, we had sports relief. So we were able to have this big public event just a week before lockdown. Then lockdown happened and we had to figure out what to do with our 200 plus staff. So working from home seems pretty straightforward, but we were very aware that working from home means different things to different people. So working from home meant that we're going to create a graduated scheme for working from home. Some people were fine, we're going to be able to work from 9 to 5, but other people, because of their caring responsibilities, etc., would mean that we would have to be agile and flexible, which would mean that you've got 7 days. You can do the work anytime within those 7 days to support you to be able to continue working. We knew that it was then become impossible for some people to manage this balancing of different things. And then the next thing was, okay, let's not really focus on how many hours you're working, for example. Let's focus on you delivering. And actually, our staff have delivered over and above what we have expected. But we are also aware that one size does not fit all. And so we are continuously planning. And for those who might just not be able to cope, we said, well, we've got compassionate leave. You can take compassionate leave either all at once or gradually to help you balance your work life and your home life. And in the worst case scenario, for those who are not able to do these, can you work part-time? Can you go on a sabbatical? And in the worst case scenario, and thank God we've not reached that particular scenario, is the option of resigning. But that's the agility within the workforce. So you're looking at creating a policy for everybody, but you also have to be subjective and be able to protect those who are more vulnerable within the organization. In terms of organizational agility and the need to move in a timely manner, again, I'll use the example of Comic Relief. So we are all in lockdown, we're all working remotely. We are here to alleviate or mitigate poverty. There is a crisis, and that means that there are more vulnerable people. And we were able, within 4 weeks of working remotely, to partner with the BBC, to partner with Children in Need, and we had the Big Night In. Now, the Big Night In was a huge success. We've raised up to 70 million for good causes in the UK for some of the most vulnerable people. But all of this was arranged while working remotely. So there were no face-to-face meetings. Usually we have Red Nose Day or we have sports relief, and we have 9 months to plan, but we had 4 weeks to plan, and we were able to get through it. And that really was a testament about agility. What happened that was different? There was less time spent in meetings, less time spent commuting. And that is the thing I'm talking about, Nafasi. It's the agility. What is the opportunity? And we delivered. Why did we partner? COVID means that if we're working a different way, we need to be able to collaborate with others. We were very aware that the public, the general public, some who've been followed, some who've lost their jobs, lost their businesses, would not be able to give to all causes. And that's why we partnered with Children in Need to be able to do the fundraising for our joint efforts. And that's another form of agility. I'm also a part-time lecturer at University of East London. I lecture in the law department. And just before COVID, there was industrial action. So we had 3 or 4 weeks of disruption, and then we had COVID. And that meant that campus just basically became a ghost building in no time. Now we had 2 issues. We had students who were in student accommodation, and how do you then enforce lockdown and social distancing and the rest of it? How do you do the fact they're so far away from home? But crucially, how do you continue teaching? And we've seen that agility. So all our learning is online. So if I'm not on Zoom meetings with my clients or with Comic Relief or offering training, then I'm on Microsoft Teams in terms of lecturing. And so learning now has gone online in a much faster, accelerated way than before. The future of education is going to be bricks and clicks. So we will still continue to teach on campus, but because of social distancing and other health and safety requirements, and the fact that people just won't be comfortable, we know we're only going to be able to take 15% of our population in September who will be on campus. Everybody else is going to be online. And the question then comes to the fact that we are very aware that a very large amount of income comes from international students. Will they be able to fly into the country to come and pursue and continue their education? It will be online. The question of online sounds all okay when we're all in the UK, but we have people who are working in different time zones, and that will be the agility of how we're going to be able to move. In terms of opportunities, which is the agility, is this whole thing about what I was talking about, Nafasi, the opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities if we stop to look at it for a moment. So there's digitization. I've mentioned education. Zoom, we all know that Instagram, Facebook, everybody is jumping onto video conferencing. I come from Kenya. Kenya is building its own video conferencing app, which is good. We don't have to use what's already available. We want to be able to manufacture and consume in our own borders. There's been an increase of all kinds of apps, and my colleague Stephanie Boyce mentioned the increase in gender-based violence, etc. And so apps are being used to send notifications of risk and danger reporting, etc. So there's an opportunity for digitization. In terms of health and safety, we are on the verge in the UK of having the test, track, and trace. So digital is a big opportunity. So we're in a crisis, but in the crisis, there is this nafasi, manufacturing. Although we're in the UK, I am African diaspora, Africa has risen to the occasion. There's been the absence of PPE because there's a shortage here in the global north, so we're not going to be sending PPE abroad. In terms of testing, Senegal has been able to produce a testing kit that costs $1. Senegal has also been able to produce a prototype of a ventilator that costs less than $200. All African countries are producing PPE now. This could be the onset of Africa realizing that we can manufacture and consume on our own. So here is another limited example of opportunity. In terms of timing and this whole thing about health being wealth, the UK has had a mixed bag, and that's the whole thing about agility. So, you know, we've had one of the highest death rates. It's nothing to be proud about. It's been really, really difficult. But that's because it's been a delay in making decisions. And we've now seen what those kind of delays happen. When you delay in going into lockdown, for example, when you delay in announcing social distancing, when you don't provide PPE in time, we've seen the difficulty whereby you're being agile but not being agile enough. But on the other hand, it's not all doom and gloom. We've seen how the UK rose to the occasion and built the Nightingale hospitals. That happened within weeks. So there are different examples. But the opportunity here for the future is two-pronged. One is individual responsibility for your own healthcare and governmental responsibility for healthcare. So we've had the first peak of COVID in the UK. We're anticipating maybe 2 other peaks in COVID. We mustn't be caught with our pants down on the next occasion because we have learned various lessons during this particular time. If you are from the African diaspora community, then there's been a lot of fundraising because this is our culture. When things go wrong, we've been fundraising for funerals, for health, etc. That's fine. But in that is a lesson and an opportunity. The whole thing about having insurance for those who are back home in Africa, the thing about having funeral insurance, for example, wherever you are in the world. So that's another opportunity to be able to improve things for ourselves and for our communities. Urban and city planners, we are going to have to go back to work. So after 3 months of being told what to do, we're coming to a place whereby we have to make our own decisions. So for a long time, and I won't talk too much about human rights because Stephanie has already done that, there was this whole thing, it's about, I think it's agility and resilience is about mindset. So you could say our human rights have been violated. Restriction of freedom of movement, association, assembly, and that's all true. But a positive mindset then lets you know that actually all of those things that you're doing are to save lives. So you are sacrificing your rights to protect yourself and to protect the public. So for 3 months, we've been told what to do. But at the moment, we have to make up our own minds. People are petrified, for example, about going onto the tube. I am not rushing onto the tube because you've seen the scenes there. So we're going to have a change of mindset to allow us to prepare to go back to work. Organizations, law firms, charities, everybody's going to have to ensure that they're able to provide confidence to their staff, that when they come to work, they'll be safe. So let's forget about the commute. People were asking questions such as how many in a lift, social distancing in offices, sanitization, cleanliness. We're used to going to the coffee maker and making coffee, sharing tea, etc. All of those are opportunities. People are making money because we have to now change our work environment. A lot more of us are working from home. There are opportunities within construction, within those who are architects, within those who are interior designers, because we're going to have to change the way that we live and work. So I could talk about opportunities for a very long time, but there have been many. What I'd like to talk about, because I've been going on for a little while, is diversity and inclusion. Often in the past 9 weeks, I have spoken about the fact that I am just really tired. I am so tired. I am so frustrated. I am so angry. And this has been largely fueled by the fact that we all know that Black people and BME people in this country, there's been a larger number of us that have been dying. And not just frontline workers. And frontline workers, actually, the stats show that 60% of NHS frontline workers that have died are from the BME community. But in terms of the general population, our death rate is even higher. The reasons for those, we don't need to analyze and get caught up. The reasons are really, really clear. It is structural inequality and institutional racism. For a long time, those of us who work in this sphere have always known that we're going to have reduced life expectancy. But now institutional racism means that actually you could die from it. Now, this is difficult because we have to deal with the day-to-day, the consequence that so many of us have died. It is also an opportunity to ensure that this agenda continues to stay in the forefront. So institutional racism does not only take away our opportunities, but actually it can take away our lives. It's as simple as that, as serious as that, which means that within our organizations, within the law society, within the charity commission, within our law firms, wherever we're working, we have to focus to ensure that this agenda of equity remains on the table. So things are bleak, but on the other hand, there are opportunities to make change. So I've been going on for a while. I've got a lot more to say, but I think I'll pause for a moment and allow the other panelists to join the discourse.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that insightful introduction. And of course, you've read quite a lot of things, and quite true. There's been quite a lot of challenges, but at the same time, there's been quite a lot of opportunities for those who are able to adjust and quickly look beyond the challenges. And then, of course, there's a few key things that we need to rethink the way we do things, and the social inequalities, and some serious adjustment in terms of how we manage our life and all those. We'll go through some of these things later, and hopefully we'll come back to you later also to help us elaborate more on some of those opportunities you're seeing as we emerge from the current lockdown and move to the new normal. So if I go to our next speaker, Cecil, and also Cecil, if you can also introduce yourself and also give an overview in terms of how the situation has been on your side, if you agree with the previous panel speakers, Stephanie and Jacqueline, that you're also seeing the same from the same eye leadership, or has it been different? How have you been reacting to the emerging challenges?
Yeah, thank you, Eugene, for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to speak on this call. So I really, I agree with what Stephanie and Jacqueline have said so far, and I was just kind of, nodding my head, thinking, some of the issues that you're mentioning are so true, across the board. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. So I'm in the tech and entrepreneurial industry. I'll give you a bit of background on me. So, you know, around the topic of Nafasi that you were saying, Jacqueline, it kind of reminded me of my childhood when I was a teenager back in 2004. And I really wanted to earn money. I just couldn't find a job. I'm from Harrow, and there's not a lot of Black people in Harrow. And sometimes when you're going out looking for a job, you might tend to think, you know, someone is biased against you. But yeah, eventually what I did is I settled on a cleaning job, which I did every day after college. And that helped me bring in £30 a month, which was a lot of money for me, you know, seeing as I didn't really have money back then. And I combined that with the educational maintenance allowance, which was another £30. So that's £60 a month, sorry, a week, which was a great amount for me. And, you know, on that topic of Nafasi, what I did was I thought, I don't want to spend this money on clothes and cool stuff. I actually want to get more money from this money. And so what I did was I used that £60 to go to Walthamstow Market and buy trainers that were really cheap, trainers and hoodies, actually. And Walthamstow is quite a long way away from Harrow. It was nearly about 2 hours, nearly 2 hours. So going there 2 hours, coming back 2 hours. And I used to buy stuff. And at that time, eBay was kicking off. And so what I did was bought stuff at the market and then sold it on eBay. And I began to make profit very, very quickly. And I was selling to people that had never heard of Walthamstow Market. So, you know, I was at an advantage, and they had no clue that I was marking up the items by nearly 100% and selling it to them. You know, after a while, I started getting quite a bit of money, but I just didn't know how to manage it. I was running a business, but I didn't understand what a business was. And so after a while, a few incidents caused me to lose a lot of that money. For example, I branched out into mobile phones, and I lost mobile phones in the post without insuring them. And that was hundreds of pounds just lost instantly. And because of that, I decided to kind of give it up. Why do I talk about this? I talk about this because I saw opportunity and I went for it, and I made something of it. Right now, I'm a director in a social enterprise called Foundervine, and we help people from underrepresented backgrounds build startups from scratch, right? So people like myself in the past that possibly, you know, had a small break, you know, got £60 and were able to do something with it and help them build startups and manage them properly, right? Because if there is opportunity and a spark of interest, people can grow from it, right? People can grow from that opportunity. And this situation that we're in right now, it really depends on how you look at it. It is a very negative situation with people dying, people ill. It affects people from BAME backgrounds a lot more than other backgrounds. And, you know, it could be all doom and gloom. Or you could look at it from the other angle, that there are businesses that existed before that are no longer occupying space in the market. And if you have an idea that is more efficient, you could build something to fill that gap, right? So one of my other roles is I'm a managing director in a technology company called Hiberus. We're based in Spain. I look after the UK. We build software and do consulting for companies such as Santander, Interflora, Boots Healthcare. So we build software and do integrations, a lot of the boring stuff that no one really likes with technology, but is so crucial and important. And what I have seen over the last few months is businesses changing fundamentally who they are. And it really depends what sector they're in. So for example, you've got companies like Peloton. Have you guys heard of Peloton? Yeah, okay. So they came up with that flashy bike, really expensive with the screen there. and you can go on to Peloton and do fitness classes from your house. I don't have one, I don't have that much money, but this is a company that has really benefited from this period of COVID-19. They have made way more sales than they should have because people are stuck in the home and they need something to do. And because they see a Peloton bike advertised and they think, wow, like I'm going to buy that bike, right? But they previously wouldn't have, right? So Peloton is an example of a company that has benefited from this. And you also look at Zoom, right? Before COVID-19, Zoom was, yeah, people knew about Zoom, but not everyone was necessarily using it. But after COVID-19, so many people are on Zoom. In fact, their stock price has gone up from February to now, 203%. And that's unprecedented. They've got their earnings call on Monday, and I think it's going to shoot through the roof, right? Zoom has had a massive kind of desire for people to use it, but that's also come with its problems that people have realized that it's not as secure as they said it was. So you've got security issues, you've got performance issues as well, and also, you know, people hacking into chat rooms and, you know, posting or saying racist things and really offending people, right? So that's an example of a company that has had opportunity, but also certain elements of their business have been highlighted to be bad and risky. And then you've got, you know, companies like my good old friend Primark, who refused to sell stuff online because they were so big and successful at what they were doing, and perhaps the online model would cost them too much. Well, where are Primark now? They haven't been able to sell a single sock during the COVID-19 period because of that reluctance to change and be, you know, a digital company. And their parent company, AB Foods, their stock price is down 70% compared to, you know, companies like Ocado, whose stock price is up 180%, right? So it depends on what industry you are in. That will affect you differently in terms of how your business proceeds through COVID-19. Things that I've seen a massive shift to e-commerce platforms. My company, Hiberus Technology, we build hundreds of e-commerce platforms for companies every single year. An e-commerce platform is simply a software solution that's hosted online that allows companies to sell to customers directly or to sell to businesses directly. And we've been getting so many requests to build new ones during this period, which is great, but it's also not great because these businesses should have thought about that before. Why should COVID-19 be the reason that your business transforms digitally and not yourselves doing that proactively? So e-commerce is, you know, really taken off. And we've also seen new technology being used where previously it wasn't. In Spain, which is where my company is based, the police are now using drones to tell people to go indoors and to shout out messages, which is quite handy actually, because if the last thing you want is people speaking over each other, you know, get a drone to do it, and there's a reduced risk of infections as well. And yeah, lastly, around the technology area, many companies, as I have been saying, they're reluctant to make changes to their technology system because it's kind of like if their system's not broken, don't fix it, right? Oh, we've got a customer relationship management system that you know, will help us get 50% more customers and will improve the satisfaction rating by 40%. Well, yeah, when it comes to the director of the company making the decision, they probably won't go for it because those gains are not certain. But what we've seen during this period is technology being fast-tracked through approval processes just in order to survive and to operate. Right? I mentioned e-commerce systems already, but you've got things like you know, teleconferencing technology as well, or custom apps that are built for use within companies to communicate and help with approval processes, etc. A lot of these things have been fast-tracked, and that's really good, because technology, a lot of times it's very hard to convince people that you want to implement this technology, because people are more or less running away from problems rather than moving towards a better future. So that's it on technology. There's a whole host of things around entrepreneurship that I've seen as well, and one of those is social entrepreneurs really coming to the forefront now. You've heard stories of people using 3D printers to print masks for the NHS workers, to help protect them, right? And they've done that, off their own backs, and it's not for profit. You've heard of companies like Brewdog, and also there was, I think it was I can't remember, it was a luxury company that they all came together and they created alcohol gel for people to be able to cleanse their hands, right? And there's so many examples of companies doing really good things, and entrepreneurs springing up and creating new things. One of my friends has launched his app during this period called TutorBlock. TutorBlock is a platform for tutors to school kids and teach them things, and it's all done online. And they've had such a massive surge from the COVID-19 period, and that's a good example of a company taking advantage of the nafasi, as Jacqueline put it. There's so many other things I could talk about, but yeah, in the interest of just making sure everyone else gets a chance to speak, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Cecil, for that also good introduction, in addition to other speakers. Of course, as you mentioned, technology has taken the center stage, creating a lot of opportunities for those who are open to opportunities, or those who are ready to exploit any and seize any opportunity, especially you with an entrepreneurial mindset. This is important in a crisis, because crisis create opportunity. And probably we'll get to this deep dive on this later on if the time permit. But let me invite our next speaker, Lucy, also to share her perspective, to introduce herself first. And also, I know she works with quite a lot of social entrepreneurs and quite a big community, and also to share her experience in terms of how the situation has been with the current crisis. Lucy, welcome. And
thank you very much, Eugene. And it's really good to have followed on from Cecil as well, because obviously he's been talking about social entrepreneurialism. I've been in the social enterprise world now pretty much since the phrase was coined, so I'm a bit of an old lag in this area. But I still haven't lost enthusiasm for it. And I think at this point in time, it's really important to think about different types of business, such as social enterprises that are essentially values-driven businesses. And I think that is going to be a very important key point for the future post-COVID. And I think that actually social enterprises time is coming. Having said that, obviously it's been a challenging time for all of us. I came back from Russia at the beginning of the COVID crisis, and it was quite a surreal experience to move straight into lockdown. And the thing that we do as a social enterprise is that we are accrediting other types of social enterprises, a bit like fair trade, on the basis of the organisation's values and how it reinvests its profits for social and environmental benefits. And I thought, oh, how on earth are we going to operate, and how are the social enterprises going to respond to this difficult situation, because everything is starting to close down. Lots of social enterprises losing their sources of income, and there are huge challenges here to any type of business, as has been heard. But what I was really impressed with was how quickly everybody just pivoted, is the term that's being used, or adjusted to the new situation. And my team, we were already pretty much able to work from home, but we adjusted straight away to work from home. And one of the first things I did, which has been, I think, mentioned by Jacqueline and emphasised, was reached out to other leaders in the social enterprise world and said, how can we help social enterprises collectively? I mean, you know, we'd all had our differences, and people will know in the sort of business network world, there's, you know, this business network doing this and this one doing that, but we all came together. And the first thing that we did was we started to lobby the government for key prioritization of social enterprises, because we said, if social enterprises don't survive this crisis, what sort of economy will we have coming out? Because social enterprises are the glue that holds society together. They fit where the market doesn't deliver. They deliver to disadvantaged communities. They deliver in places where businesses, you know, other types of businesses just wouldn't even go. And in some cases, they're delivering government programs. Now, one of the first things that we did then was to all come together and create a campaign, Save Our Social Enterprises, to build back better. And the Build Back Better campaign, I'd encourage people to have a look at that. There's a hashtag that trends, which is looking at how we can build the economy back better and think about what it is that we want to see the economy looking like after this crisis, and to build a more positive economy that is people focused rather than just focused on, you know, shareholder gain. So some of the experiences that I had at that time, I felt quite strongly that I wanted to help as many social enterprises as I could. And so we developed a suite of products and services to try and help social enterprises in partnership with others. And we joined together to help. In particular, I've been working with the banking sector to try and improve the experience of loans. And I think I talked about this with Eugene at the very beginning of this process, where I've now started to work with the mainstream banks to help social enterprises access loans, because loan finance has been quite inaccessible for social enterprises, where banks just don't understand what it is that they're trying to do. And this has been particularly difficult for some of the social enterprises that have had to shut. And they've been trying to produce a business model and demonstrate how they're going to be able to come out of this, which is quite a hard thing to do in the first place. But if the bank doesn't actually understand the business model, that's an even bigger challenge. So some of the social enterprises I would mention that have seen particular problems have been those that have been on the front line, for instance, leisure centres. Other types of social enterprises that have been in difficulty have pivoted very quickly to look at different ways of delivering. So I have just become a trustee of the Big Issue Invest Trust. Now, most of you will, I hope, know of the Big Issue. It's a social enterprise that exists through homeless people selling the magazine on the streets. The big challenge, of course, was that people could no longer sell on the street. So how on earth were they going to earn the income to support these vulnerable homeless people? So there was a big campaign that was launched to try and get donations for the big issue, but also to completely change the business model so that they could get more people that would buy a subscription of the big issue, and to get corporates to buy the big issue subscriptions as well. And to use the Big Issue Investment Trust to support both the big issue and the street sellers. We also talked to some of our mark holders. So, for instance, the Watershed Media Trust in Bristol, a very famous creative industries-led social enterprise, and they get most of their money from, more than 50% of their money comes from trading and trading through bricks, as Jacqueline would say, and they have done the same thing and started to deliver online. But the other thing that they've started to look at is what will be the trajectory coming out of COVID? How can we adjust what it is that we are trying to do to address those problems? And one of the trends that we are looking at the moment is the fact that the government is going to be very concerned about high levels of unemployment. And how can social enterprises, in particular young people, how can social enterprises help to address that? Because they have, most of them are trying to employ people from marginalized communities and are experts in trying to get people in employment from hard to reach groups and those that tend to stay on the unemployment register. So there are lots of ways in which social enterprises have been adapting. Having said that, you know, it's still very hard times, and I think we're only just beginning to see the effects that will happen as the government starts to remove some of the support structures. We've heard tonight that the Chancellor is beginning to release the furlough scheme, and employers will start to have to pay first national insurance and pension contributions following on from that, portions of salaries. And I think we will start to see a bit of a wave behind COVID, if you like, of businesses that begin to find it really, really hard. But we think that there are, you know, definite opportunities. And the other thing that I've picked up is been about how we sell our products in adversity, because we are a social enterprise ourselves. All of our income comes from license fees that we sell to our mark holders, and we sell across the world to all different social enterprises in all different countries. And it's really about listening to the customer. What is it? What is the pain? It's the same as selling at any point, but what is the pain that they're feeling? And just taking time to really understand what your existing customers are, what experiences they are having, and being able to adapt your product to help them with the problems that they are feeling. So my leadership lessons, I suppose, are about being flexible, as has been said, listening to the customers, and trying to be aware at a time of crisis that the way in which people react to you may not just be about you, it may be about all sorts of other things that are going on in their lives, given the amount of stress that we're all going through at the moment. And I'm very conscious of that with my employees, but we need to be conscious of that with those customers that we interact with too. So lastly, I would just like to emphasize the kind of the values-driven thing, because I think that will be a really important aspect of how businesses adapt coming out. And certainly that's something that some of the ethical corporate world is talking about. How will people address things like, you know, sustainability indicators? How will they actually show that they are values driven rather than being merely driven by shareholder profit?
Thank you, Lucy, for also that insightful presentation. And of course, you kind of agree with some of the previous speaker. And it's good you mentioned one key thing about leadership lesson learned in terms of listening and being flexible to not just your employee, also your customer, because people are faced with so many challenges. They might be reacting not just because of their behavior, it might be various things also in their mind which can easily affect their behavior at the point of time, which is a good point. And of course, I've also picked up the way the big issue has struggled and managed to readjust their model faced with the changes in the market circumstances, that they are no longer able to sell their big issue on the street. It's a good learn and good lesson learned. Thank you for that, and hopefully we'll get to hear from you if the opportunity permits. But let me go to our second last final speaker, Chikondi, also. Welcome, Chikondi, and if you can also introduce yourself and give a bit of brief in terms of some of the changes you've seen, and probably if you can quickly maybe skim through if some of the things other speakers have spoken, if you agree with them or you have a different perspective, or what's your thought, how your world has been, and some of the key takeaway you've learned from the situation.
Thank you, Eugene, and I want to thank Stephanie, Cecil, Lucy, Jacqueline for all their contributions, and I think that from the different perspectives that they are speaking from, it makes sense. The COVID-19 crisis pandemic has affected in different industries in different ways. And yes, even understanding what Lucy has just been talking about under social enterprise, we are seeing all these changes, and we are all trying to adapt and respond rapidly and ensure that we are making decisions and carrying along the people with us as we are making the decisions, because the situation is constantly changing. It is dynamic, but also challenging to many industries. I'm Chikondi. I am working on girls' education and, of course, also out-of-school children in Nigeria. I'm an education expert as well as a gender expert. So my perspectives are within that frame, as COVID-19 has been clearly seen. We have seen that in the education sector, COVID-19 has actually impacted in terms of disruption of learning. And this is not only in Nigeria, but across the world. Every government, in response to strategies to curb COVID-19, made decisions to close schools. But from where we sit, we are saying learning doesn't need to stop. It's not because learning only takes place within the four walls of a classroom. Learning can continue and should continue. So we have seen that a disruption of learning has impacted a lot of learners across the world. It has also disrupted the assessment processes and procedures where we were anticipating the learners we are going to get a certificate. In some countries, they have decided that all learners are not moving a grade. They will remain in the grade that they were in because their system was not better enough to adjust to allow continuous assessment to help them assess the learners in order for them to make decisions to move learners to the next grade. And we have also seen in some countries where learners are able to access learning through digital media. There is home-based learning through radio, through televisions, through WhatsApp, social media. Teachers have created Google Classrooms, WhatsApp groups, and all this manner of teaching. And suffice to say that all these kind of teachings and ways of trying to adapt, because we are trying to be agile. We are trying to adapt to what is going on around us. We will also note that the learners do not have learning materials within their hands, within their reach, because they are textbooks, they are notebooks were left in their schools, and they are at home, they are listening to radio lessons, television lessons, and they do not have teaching and learning resources at home. And then we also see that learners are faced with their parents at home, and most parents have now turned into teachers at home. And this is also something that for the education sector, we are very well aware that the guardians, the parents are engaging and adapting, ensuring that their learners are the learning is continuing to take place. But also what we have seen as a result of COVID-19 is that the burden of care has shifted. It is now where care was paid for, it is now unpaid, because we will have we would be able to pay for children to attend kindergarten, or they will attend pre-primary school, that we would pay for them to go to primary or secondary school. But now they are at home and they are being cared for, and we are not paying, and the ones that are getting the brunt of that unpaid care are the women. So the women and girls at home have now taken on the responsibility and the burden of care. And also with the fact that COVID-19 is a pandemic, which is sick, we will have a lot of sick people at home, and women have to look after the sick people. They have to care for them. They have to prepare meals, 3 square meals a day, and all these kind of things. The burden has shifted, and has shifted unequally or insignificantly onto the women and the girls. The other issues that we have also noted are issues of protection, child protection, abuse on children. Some children are within homes where they are abused, and this is going unchecked, because there is no way where we would be able to notice or check, because some of the checks around child abuse is checked in schools, where teachers are able to note whether children have been abused or not. And learning from what happened during Ebola, in Sierra Leone, they had closed the schools for 1 month as a result of Ebola, and they were dealing with Ebola. 11,000 girls were made pregnant during that period, and they never returned to school when the schools opened. And this is, we know, is a reality which is going on, and there are issues that we'd have to be looking at. We are trying to adapt to say, how do we ensure there is a protection of the girl child as well as the boy child, because abuse happens at various levels in different homes. So those are the things that we are also looking at and considering, and how we would be navigating around them. We have been able to navigate around several issues. We know that we would be losing the gains that we have attained in education, in learning, as learners are not engaging in learning in many places around the world. About 20-30% of populations do not have access to radio, television, or social media, or radio, or even a mobile phone. So those learners do not have access to learning, and we are aware that these are issues that we need to be thinking about how to reach them. So one of the strategies we are also having is the home deliverers packages of learning materials delivered in homes. And of course, we know that goes without challenge, because then when they receive the packages, the parents are, oh, we don't know what to do with this and all that. But we're working with communities to be able to work on ways of engaging the teachers. Now, that brings me to the other issue,
Chikondi,
which is,
just
yes.
a quick reminder, you have 1 minute left, so if you can be a bit brief and quick. And
Thank you very much. So the other issues around teachers, how the teachers have been impacted. Teachers also, if this is their profession, and due to COVID-19, they were just told you cannot teach anymore, you must go home, and they are home and nobody's talking to them, nobody's saying anything to them, but these are professionals and they want to do something. So looking at what their psychosocial support is and how they are being supported as the pandemic goes on is also one of the important things that we have considered. Some of the schools have been used already as isolation centers in many countries, and we have real concerns about what will it be like when the schools are going to reopen, and how the learners and the teachers will be protected. And so putting in measures of disinfection and sanitization of these schools is also one of the issues that we have been looking at. So decisions have been made on the go, and carrying along people, consultation with the different key stakeholders, the governments and the states. We'll have to continue doing that. But we are seeing COVID-19 as a way of, as an opportunity that has brought a revolution in the education sector. And the education sector will not be the same, because now we will have to be using these alternative ways of learning, and they are here to stay. Thank you very much, Eugene. I'll stop there for now.
hello? Can you hear?
Yes, we can.
Ah, okay, sorry. I think there was an issue in my technical. Yeah, thank you so much, Chikondi. Of course, a few things are noted from your discussion is the shift in terms of education learning from classroom to online, and of course, everyone agreed that things like more mass online study has taken the center stage. And one of the key things I like from your discussion is how we're making decision and be able to carry people along while you're making decision. That's important also, especially in the current crisis. So if I move to our last speaker, Chibwe, and also to welcome her to give a bit intro to and share her perspective in how the situation has been on her side. See if she agree with the rest of the speaker. No, maybe some of them might have shared things that you share in common, but if you also can be quick and brief so that we can go through a few of the Q&A session that we have. That would be good.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion. It's actually an honor to be included in such a distinguished panel. And I'm pleased that Chikondi spoke before me because she set the scene for me, and I'll try and speed through. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. I am an NGO and international development management professional with a track record of working for and building local and national international charities and grant makers. So my perspective is therefore informed by this experience. I currently work for Comic Relief as a partnership manager for DFID. So Jackie is one of my trustees, and she's one of the brilliant trustees that looks after me. So I'm very well looked after at home. Thank you, Jackie, as you heard. And as you know, I will skip through what Comic Relief does. The only thing I can add is that Comic Relief is a major grant-making charity based in the UK, which strives to create a just world free from poverty. In my role, I lead a complex 25 million plus portfolio of grants, which is co-funded between Comic Relief and the Department for International Development, and it's called All in All Learning. This is across 9 African countries, including Ethiopia, Ghana, Mali, Malawi, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The program aims to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for the poorest and most disadvantaged, whilst building stronger and more inclusive education systems in sub-Saharan Africa. I've also been an active member in the diversity and inclusion work that Comic Relief has been engaging, led by the amazing Jackie. So prior to Comic Relief, I founded and led an African diaspora-led NGO based in the UK called Diaspora for African Development. Our aim was to contribute to Africa's sustainable social and economic development through harnessing the potential of the African diaspora for development. This experience is why I'm here today. I wanted to develop my capability and substance in order to make a difference back home. My motivation was that simple. It led me to engage with the UK and Zambian governments and other African governments. It led me to engage with the UN, with IOM, with collaborations across IOM and other institutions and civil society organizations. I did this as a volunteer for 6 years with significant impact and influence, to the point where we got the Zambian government to enact dual citizenship and introduce a diaspora policy. So at that point, I had to go back to university to get my master's in NGO and development management, get a pre-doctorate, turn my career around 100%, and actually end up getting paid for doing what I do every day anyway. So that's why I'm here. Outside my work, I'm a program advisory committee member for one of UK's charities, Chance for Childhood. I'm also a trustee for a newly branded grant maker in the UK called Play It Forward. We fund mainly in southern province of Zambia, so it's brilliant. As a Zambian diaspora, I'm connected with through my work back home. I'm also one of the founding members of Zambians Together, which Jackie alluded to around, not the organization, but the work around how the diaspora have been responding to COVID-19, and I'm part of the community, and we're trying to see how we can support and create this one-stop shop for information and support for the Zambian community in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And finally, I'm a Doctor of Business Administration candidate with an interest in conducting research that will explore what Southern African-based NGOs think their organization development priorities post-COVID-19 will be, which is a key significant research, because it will contribute to an emerging pool of knowledge that will inform our practice as donors, as delivery partners, within the sector, of how we move forward within the sector beyond the crisis. This discussion is therefore important to me, as it is currently permeating throughout both my professional and personal engagements. In my role as a partnership manager, for example, some of the key challenges that have emerged as a result of COVID-19 from our partners who support communities across the continent, are actually similar to what Chikondi was talking about. So I was so pleased, because it means we must be on track. Yeah, so some of the, I'll summarize them, because she's touched on most of them. So some of the issues are concerns around food security, These are becoming very crucial as due to social distancing, parents are not able, to go and earn money in the market or do, labor work. People have lost their jobs and their incomes are reduced. And consequently, unfortunately, the consequence of this is that children, most marginalized children, are now beginning to suffer from malnutrition, especially children with disabilities. The lack of access to hygiene materials, which have been alluded to, means that preventative measures to hinder the spread of COVID-19 is not happening in many, many vulnerable communities. While the lack of social contact is increasing the risk of stress for parents and caregivers, which means that later on, it might impact their mental health negatively and impact their ability to re-engage with the community, to go back to work. So the cycle continues. There's also a lack of learning materials. I won't even touch on that. The key bit is that IT platforms are not everywhere. I love Jackie mentioned the opportunity around IT, but unfortunately, some of the communities that we support have no access to mobile phones, no access to tablets or internet. So when we talk about, innovations of how we go forward, how we teach, we need to be aware that some contexts are not even there, nowhere close to that. And then community volunteers at health centers do not have access to personal protective equipment and the knowledge to also on how to manage COVID-19. So this is negatively impacting their effectiveness. They want to help, they want to be there, but they don't know how to because this is not filtering down to them. And as the impact of COVID-19 has resulted in now, and this is, thank you so much, Chikondi, for mentioning this, because one of the key results is the fact that there's no longer monitoring of vulnerable groups in communities. So the risk of children with disabilities, their parents, vulnerable families being at risk of exploitation and child abuse and domestic abuse is so high in these communities. And we need to start thinking about how we mitigate this. There is also a fear that key life skills, again touched on by Chikondi, that have been developed. And in particular, for example, the stigma, reducing stigma around children with disabilities, encouraging families to send their children to school with disabilities. All these skills are getting lost. All that behavior change that was done and developed over years, there's a fear that we're going to lose all that because these children are no longer visible in their wider communities. They're no longer engaging with children without disabilities. They're hidden again. So we're literally going back years from all the work and investment that we've put into trying to counter those negative behaviors. So therefore, during this period of crisis, as a donor, and I'm speaking from Comic Relief, as a donor, we aim to be as flexible as possible to ensure that organizations can repurpose their investments to carry out activities that are not in their approved budgets or projects in response to COVID-19. And thanks to trustees like Jackie, that's been signed off and it's going brilliantly. So, however, the investment will still have to continue to be within the restricted terms of meeting Comic Relief's charitable mission. Otherwise, Jackie fires me. So it's, either or, you try to balance it. So we also accept that due to Comic Relief, to the COVID-19 crisis, as program managers, we know that there will be a likely reduction in outputs and outcomes within the lifetime of our partners' investments. And we've made it very clear to our partners to reduce some of the stress that these projects are going through, thinking they have to keep going and meet, these agreed outputs, even at risk of their own staff. And one of the things I'm very, very proud of that our board has signed off is that we've committed to paying 100% of salaries internationally. So all the parents and caregivers and sessional workers that were engaged in this project, we're paying 100% because the support that the UK government is giving here, is not, most countries don't have that kind of social welfare, that kind of support. We acknowledge that as a donor and we're doing what we can. And in the UK, we know that the government is supporting, but we are happy for investment to cover or to top up the 20% that is not being covered by government support. However, that's changing. So it means we will also have to go back to drawing board in order to respond to what the government comes up with. And of course, we've got requests for extensions to the projects, no-cost extensions that's being dealt with by program managers individually. And we are also committed to ensuring that we support the sector to meet the needs arising from the crisis in the most effective and impactful ways. So one of the ways we're doing this is by working through with other funders to ensure a coordinated sector-wide response in distributing emergency funding both to the UK and international partners. And so just to summarize, for instance, yesterday, I had an opportunity to attend a brilliant webinar, last evening that focused on the crucial role that civil society and community-based organizations play in delivering during a crisis like COVID-19. It was hosted by the International Education Funders Group, which I'm sure Chikondi knows, and led by two of our partners, Firelight and Aga Khan. I was so proud to be in that webinar. It was really encouraging to hear confirmation from some of our key stakeholders that our COVID response was on track and aligned with the wider donor response. The focus of the webinar was mainly for donors to hear from grantee partners as to what the immediate and long-term impact of COVID on their work and communities was. The discussion aimed to find out what donors were focused on, what role, for example, the large foundations could play, what role small foundations could play, how could we get past the barriers that we and our community-based organizations are facing, and not just wait for a crisis like COVID before we appreciate the role that these community-based organizations play that are closer to the beneficiaries and the communities. Yeah. It was also noted that the silver lining, and I know Jackie has spoken about the opportunities, and most of you have spoken around the opportunities around COVID. Within the donor community, the silver lining that we're seeing is to go back to the drawing board, to work through together as a team to understand what systems we could change and the areas that we could strengthen. It's really important. It was highlighted again that lessons from Ebola have to be taken on board, because we will end up again with 11,000 girls, maybe 22,000 girls pregnant. Then what? When we've seen it happen before, why are we going to let it happen again? Yeah. In addition, so some of the proposed actions were to include support that builds on existing community capacity so that this is held in place, and supporting interventions that focus on child protection and good parenting in a transitional way, so as not to start again at the beginning post-COVID. It's going to cost money, time, lives, effort. We need to prevent that. So for me, that discussion, was focused on finding out what architectural systems donors could shift and change, and how we could work together to achieve this under common alignment. It was an opportunity to revamp donor action, revive motivation, and then move into action. So finally, I'm therefore keen to be part of the follow-up sessions that were discussed, so that Comic Relief is part of the discourse in how we move this collaborative process forward. And finally, my last 3 points as recommendations for donors going forward. One, there is a need for immediate emergency support to reach communities. Whilst donors are busy talking about what are we going to do, these communities are left vulnerable. They don't have time to wait for us to decide how we do whatever we're doing. Donors need to start thinking long-term and start putting in support to help communities mitigate the negative impact that COVID-19 will cause. And within Comic Relief, we have a 3-pronged strategy where we're looking at emergency, we're looking at, I think, rebuilding, emergency recovery, and then rebuilding, so that our response is targeted to where our partners and communities are. And finally, donors need to work closer with local delivery organizations on the ground who have the ability to carry out needs assessments in these communities in order to better understand what support is needed and where we can direct it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chibwe, for that also additional insightful discussion. Of course, Africa has more affected more than the developed economy, and the opportunities and the challenges are different, depend how you look at it. But from every angle is an opportunity to rethink the way we do things and how organizations do things. But in the interest of time, it looks like we are running out of time, but I'm sure you don't mind for 5 minutes, we can just listen to Dennis, who's been listening to some of the discussion, and I think probably, Dennis, there's one key question that came up is if the current crisis is likely to stimulate or accelerate collaborative working and inclusive leadership. While before Dennis take over, I don't know if anybody want to answer that question. Do you see the current crisis likely to accelerate collaborative working and inclusive leadership? We know that diversity or diversified leadership has a lot of opportunity, including creativity, knowledge from different, but what's your thought? And then Dennis can just summarize. Anybody want to answer that, or then? Okay, Dennis, you can take over and then probably. Sorry?
This is Jackie. I think I want to say something about inclusive leadership, and it's from two angles. So for my own experience, I gave the comic relief example of collaborating with the BBC, who is our historic partner, but also Children in Need. But in terms of leadership at board level, and at any level really, inclusive leadership means that we are able to live our values. So you consult. When you consult, you get better results. So diversity and inclusion, I'm always going to talk about diversity and inclusion. You've got to ensure that everybody is represented at decision-making tables. Otherwise, we won't come up with the solutions or innovations that really take everybody along. So inclusive leadership is absolutely paramount. I believe that Lucy also touched on that. It's imperative, but in the same hand with inclusive leadership, so one of the problems with inclusive leadership is that it takes time. You've got to consult, etc. I think we also have situational leadership. So sometimes we might have to make urgent decisions, maybe because of public directives. But over and above all, the importance, the value of inclusion, diversity of thought is absolutely crucial. And then the inclusivity, the people who are at that table are not just present, but are empowered to contribute. So that's it. Because of time, I won't bang on.
Thank you, Jackie. Dennis, from your perspective, I know you've been listening to all the speakers carefully. Do you agree with some of them? I'm sure they've raised quite a lot of key points and key takeaway in terms of some of the running as part of the current crisis. Do you agree with some? Do you?
I concur wholeheartedly. And one of the things I liked about today's discussion was the variety, breadth of discussions and contributions from the legal fraternity to education to enterprise and entrepreneurship. But one of the underlying themes that came through was the extent to which digital and innovation has played a significant role during this COVID-19 pandemic. And in particular, not just in the UK generally, but also within our African communities in the UK, as well as our mother continent, Africa. I'm very much aware of a number of projects that are happening on the ground, very interesting projects that would not have otherwise happened. But here in the UK, within our community, we've seen, I mean, for us as One Africa Network, we would be having this event somewhere, maybe in a hotel or in a university setting, but here we are. So technology has been deployed. The other thing that has come through during this COVID-19 pandemic, and when we're talking about agility and leadership, is I have seen personally our community come together much more than it was before COVID-19. I think we've either been galvanized by the tragedy that most of us are the ones on the front line, or they are disproportionately affected, both from a health perspective, but also from a business perspective. Typically, you find that we live in silos of Kenyans, Ugandans, even though we're all East Africans. Then you have Zimbabwe, Zambia, but somehow there is a voice coming out, an African voice, both on the continent and even here in the diaspora. So I hope that we can harness all that energy going forward. I'm very mindful that we're running out of time, so I'd like to yield the floor back. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending. If you could give us some feedback via the email that you would have received, either from Ruth or Eugene, that would be very helpful. We are tapping into something that we think is very interesting, unique, and timely. So your feedback as we build this community is very much appreciated. Back to you, Eugene.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we've gone over beyond 5 minutes. Our sincere apology. Time, I know, is very important, and we could go on with so many issues and the key opportunities that we are seeing emerging from this current crisis. And we hope to invite you again sometime in the future to share more and probably deep dive, break down some of these things, some of the key learning you've mentioned, and to help us understand more. But I don't, in the interest of time, I don't want to take more time, but I just want to thank you all our speakers for their time and the effort, and also joining us and sharing their perspective. And for those one who's been listening, we hope you've learned a lot in terms of some of the key opportunities are unfolding from the current crisis to help you navigate the situation and prepare to emerge from the situation stronger and, of course, more competitively, and thrive as we go into what we call the new normal, or it's already the normal now we're going to live in. Hopefully the situation will come out at the end of the tunnel positively and stay stronger. So thank you so much for your time. I know it's also Friday. Some of you might be keen to grab a glass of wine. So so I don't, and and the sunshine outside is looking nice, and I hope everyone, we wish you a nice weekend, and you keep safe and healthy. And as Dennis mentioned, please share your feedback, and we'll continue to communicate, and have a blessed weekend and look after yourself. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.